watching NotesIn9.
Hello, and welcome to NotesIn9. I'm David Leedy. Episode 120, Data View Control Part 2, Customization. To avoid criticism, say nothing, do nothing, be nothing. Okay, in this show, Brad Balasatis comes back on. He's a great developer. He works at PSC Group, and he's surrounded by an exceptional team of XPagers. I'm not going to try to list all their names because I'm sure I'm going to forget somebody, and then they're going to kill me while I sleep. But they're great people that he works with, and they all are available for hire if you have any needs. He's got a blog at accelerant.net, and his big claim to fame right now, among probably everything else he does that I don't know about, but in the community-wise, at least to me, is this Dojo Data Grid series, which is just this epic series. This screenshot I made back in show 115, he had 19 parts. I think he's done more since then. So I should update the screenshot. But if you want to know anything about using the Dojo Data Grid, check out his blog site because he is clearly the person that has all the information on it. And I know I want to check out the Dojo Data Grid for a project I've got coming up soon too. So be aware of that. Now, today's show is a part 2 of the data view control, where part 1 is available in NotesIn9 115. I don't have the link in here because, quite honestly, you can't copy and paste from a video. But you can Google NotesIn9 115, and that will probably show up for you. So you can find part 1. Okay. So what he's going to talk about today is more how to extend what he did in the first show and go into more customization options for the data view control. So with all that being said, let's go to the demo.
Hello, and welcome to NotesIn9, the Data View Control Part 2, Customization. My name is Brad Balasatis. I work on the XPages team at PSC Group. I blog about XPages at accelerant.net, and you can also connect with me on Twitter and LinkedIn. So in this episode, we're going to take a look at how to customize the data view control. As a quick summary, you can refer to the first part of this series where I just went over the basics of the data view control. But just as a quick recap, it's part of the extension library, but it's also included with 853 Upgrade Pack 1, so that makes it even more easily accessible. It's used in the Team Room XL template, so you can see a great example of it being used in a widely used template. And it's primarily designed around the concept of a single summary column. So if you have one field or a combination of information that uniquely identifies a document, you can use that as your summary column and build a view around it, and it can work well for you. Some of the features of the data view: it's got a much more modern look and feel than a view panel. It can handle categorization, response hierarchies, and icon columns. It can even do a multiple column layout, and that's just a simple built-in feature that we'll take a look at. One of the best parts about it is that it has this collapsible detail section that really lets you customize extra information to show that doesn't have to clutter up the screen all the time. This control is very customizable. It's got a little more flexibility than a view panel as far as data source. It's designed to work well in a full browser and on a mobile device. And it's also got these 2 extra great controls that we can use: Pager Add More Rows and the Pager Save State bean. And we'll take a look at those as we move through the show. And again, to recap, this is the general layout of a data view. As you can see where column titles display if you use them. You can see that it's got categories. The keys are really the summary column and the detail section, but it also has an icon column. You have this area off to the right for extra columns, and then you've got icons to expand and collapse the details. So in this episode, we're going to look at a number of ways that you can customize this control. We'll take a look at customizing the summary section. We'll take a look at a few ways to customize the detail section. I'll even show you how you can add code to expand and collapse the details automatically just by hovering your mouse over the summary section. We'll show you how to use the Pager Add Rows control and the Pager Save State control. We'll show you how to add search to a data view, and I'll show you the multiple column layout as well. So again, to recap, this is kind of where we left off after the first episode. This is a base data view that makes use of column titles, categories, icons. It has a summary column, extra columns off to the side, and we've got this expandable detail section that the user can make use of. So the next thing I'd like to show is how to customize the summary section. See here, by default the summary will just be a single column that you can use. That'll be the link to open the document, but there's a lot you can do to expand it. It's its own editable area, so you can customize it with other content. Now here we've got a multiple line summary section, so each row in the view shows multiple lines by default. I've just added the same information that's over here in the extra columns as a second line here in the summary. Now this kind of looks like it's already the details, but it's not. This is still the summary section because we can still expand to get more details. So let's take a look at how we did that. The first thing I just want to point out is that when you use a data view control, if we drag this onto a new custom control, just pick a source view, you can see we've got a lot of these areas here which are a dotted line around a square and a green circle. And that is called an editable area. And what that does on a control is it lets you to drag other content into it, and when the page is rendered, it will surface that content in that spot. So all these green circles that you see are places where you can customize the data view. Now primarily you're going to work with this summary section and the details section, but it's important to understand how this concept with the editable areas work. So let's just take a look at that real quick. I'm going to remove this control, and in core controls I'm going to add an editable area. You can see in the properties down here it has a name, it's called callback1, and it has a facet name called facet1. If you look in the source here, it's just this XP callback tag. Okay, so I'm going to save this control, and I've got a new blank control here where I'm going to include it. And now look what happened. In this original one where I created this callback, now when I've added that control to another control, I've got this area where I can drag and drop. Now if I look at this, all I see so far is my definition for the custom control to include, because I haven't put any content in there. So let's change that. Let me drop a panel into this spot. All I did was drag and drop it. The green circle went away because now there's content in there. And if I look at the source, let's see what it put in here. So at the top level I have this XC data view test. That's just the name of the custom control that had the editable area on it. And when I've dragged the content in here, I now have a this.facets tag, and here's that panel that I drug in. So it's within the facets, and this is the key here. This XP key equals facet1. Now if I go back to the original control, you see I have this XP callback tag, and the facet name is facet1. So the facet name on the callback and the facet name in this key tag are how they get matched up, and that's how it knows where to surface the content that we need. So I'm going to move on from this now. And this is the source. This is the first custom control with the data view that we're displaying. So if we look back here again, we have our summary column, which is all this section. It's the link with the company name, and it's the location and founded dates. So let's take a look at how that happened. Now we can see the summary section here. There's no green circle because I've already put content in there. This down here, I've got a panel and two computed fields inside of it. The first computed field is the company name, and that's a link. So if we look at the value here, I'm returning this H4 and an A tag. I didn't finish building this link, but if you're building your own summary columns, you would certainly need to build the link to open the document. But I did notice that if you want it to pick up the One UI styles for the link that matches that bigger font and the blue text just to go along with it, you need to wrap it in an H4 tag and an A tag, and that's how One UI is looking to pick it up. So what I'm doing here is just outputting those two tags, and row handle is the variable, the row variable for the parent data view. Okay, so that gives me a handle to the XSP view entry, and I can get the document and read the company name off of it. So that's what I'm returning. But also importantly, you note I've changed the content type to HTML so that I can write HTML content to the browser and not just plain text that would be escaped, and that wouldn't turn into a link. Now the second line down here, where I was just displaying two fields and labels, it's pretty similar. So I'm just returning location in bold. I'm using that row handle again to read a column value from the XSP view entry. And then I'm adding the founded value to that as well, just by reading column values. So if we look back at our view, all that stuff was sitting right in the summary facet, and that's how I can display it. Now we know I've also got a detail section here as well, and that's very similar. This detail here, I just took an editable field and drug it in here. So if we click on this, we'll see I've got this XP text tag, and here it is, this XP key equals detail. That's how it knows to show in the detail section. I didn't show this earlier. This panel in the summary section, it has an XP key equals summary. So that's how it knows to surface in the summary section. So again, this is very basic customization. I've just put some information in the summary, some information in the details, and that's how we've gotten this to surface. So the next thing I'd like to show is customizing the details section by including a repeat control. In this database that I have, it's basically simple company documents, but there are related documents to track the company's stock prices. So there's a company document, it's got its own ID in the background, and I create these price documents and inherit that company ID so that I know how to link them up. So in this example here, if I expand this detail section, I have my company description like I usually do, but now I've also got a repeat control that shows my stock price documents that are related to this company. So I can collapse this and take a look at company 3. See, we've got some prices there as well. So let's go take a look at how we did this. Now in this one, it's a standard summary column, so there's nothing customized there, but we can see in the detail, I've got some content. Now, in this case, what I've done was just create the detail stuff in a custom control and just drag it into that spot. And I think this is a best practice for good, clean design, is to put any content you want in that detail into a custom control so that the design of the page containing the data view doesn't get any more cluttered and hard to manage. So this is nice and simple to see. I've got my data view tag. Within my facets, my detail facet here is just this custom control. So we can take a look at this custom control, and on the surface it's really just a panel. It's got this computed field where I'm reading off the parent document again to get the description, and then here is a table that's wrapped in a repeat control. And the source for the repeat here, it basically just takes the company ID off that parent document in this line here, 23. So it reads this company ID off the parent document and looks up a view entry collection from a view of the prices that are categorized by that document. So it returns this view entry collection, and that's what builds the repeat control. This isn't complicated. This is a standard way to use a repeat control. But the main point here is just realizing that we can actually mix this into the detail section of the data view just to make the content even more rich. And it's nice that we can collapse this to get out of the way so that the screen is not cluttered with all of this information. So the next thing I'd like to show is taking this one step further. And this looks very much the same, but we've got one added feature. Now we have the description displaying, we have a repeat control with all the related prices, but I've also got myself a form here to add a new price. So let's say the stock price changed to 17 that day. I come click this button, and now I've added something right in line and refreshed it so that I can see it, all within the context of the details section of this data view. So let's take a look at how that was done. Okay, so it's a similar design to the last one that we showed, where basically I just created this custom control and dropped it into the detail section of the data view. And similar to the last one, we have the description, we have the repeat control to display the prices, but down here we also have this mini form and this action that adds the document. So the key to this is really on the price document. I'm taking that company ID, or I'm setting that company ID after I get it off of the parent form, and this is how they're related. So once I save it, I'm refreshing the view so that I know it's current, and then down here I'm basically just managing the data source for that form, because there seems to be an issue where once you create a document, it doesn't let go of the handle to that document. So I want to be able to add a price and then quickly add another one. So this code down here really just gets rid of the data source off of that embedded price form, and recreates it since it's a simple data source, and that way I can repeatedly add new prices as I'd like to. But the key for this, for refreshing and repeat, was really adding the company ID to this price document, saving it, and then over here initiating a partial update on this panel that contains the list of prices. So that gave us a lot more functionality there. We're displaying all the data in a repeat control, and we've got this form to add more. Next thing I wanted to show is actually nesting an entire data view. So instead of nesting a repeat control, you could actually make the list of related prices another data view. So we can actually put a data view inside of a data view, if there's a good need for that. So this other data view, it's got its own summary column, it's got its own detail area, and just for good measure, I threw in a little iframe to a stock price website just to show that we can just keep throwing things into the section for whatever that we need. Now, a couple important things to note. You'll notice that the details are expanded here in this nested data view. That's because I've noticed that once you nest them, these expand and collapse icons don't work. So if you're going to nest a data view, if it's going to have details, you're going to have to set the property to expand them automatically, because these expand and collapse icons don't do anything at this point. Okay, so let's take a look at the next demo. Next thing I wanted to show is how we can kind of trap a mouse over event to expand and collapse the section ourselves. Now we know we have the icons off to the right that expand and collapse the sections, and that works just fine, but if there's a time where you want to create your own links to do this automatically, we can actually do that, so that when we hover, we get the details, we move away, it collapses. Now the way I did this has to do with the content in the summary section. So in our summary here, I have a panel control and then one computed field inside of it. As a side note, I have noticed that you can't just drag and drop an edit box into the summary section. You seem to have to drop a panel or a div and then stick an edit box or a computed field or something like that inside of it. It seems to need a div tag around it to display properly. So let's take a look. This computed field that we have in here, so it gets a handle to the data view, and it builds the ID for the details section. And what it does is it builds calls here to display the details and hide them, by grabbing the ID and setting the style to block or none. And then in the link that it writes out, it has on mouse over, it'll call the function to display. On mouse out, it'll call the function to hide. And this is important because if we are to inspect this here, you can see that, let's see, within this row, we have a div here for the summary. We can see the name is this view ID1, ID2, data view 1, :0 underscore summary. Okay, but there's also this div down here where it ends with an underscore detail, and we can see the style is display none. Now if I hover over this, we can see that the display changed to block, and then out it displays to none. So basically, this will work if your data view is set up to include the details already on client side, then they're already sitting there in hidden div blocks. Okay, and then basically that code that we have, it knows that whatever this summary facet or whatever the summary div is called, all I have to do is take off the underscore summary and append an underscore detail, and I know how to get a handle to that div section, so it's easy to add or to display it and hide it. Again, this requires the property to display the details on the client. For the record, I tried this with the server. I first had code that would essentially find the ID of this expand and collapse icon, and when you would hover, it would force a click event on that, and that worked fine when you would hover over it, but since it had to do a partial refresh to get the data and include it on the screen, it kind of lost the context, and the on mouse out event was never fired. All of which is fine. I mean, I don't think you would really want to include functionality like that would have to hit the server every time the user moves their mouse over a link. But I at least just wanted to explain what was happening with that. Okay, the next thing let's take a look at here is the pager add rows control. Now, if I limit my data view to fewer documents, I can add this link here to show me more rows. So I had 3 by default. I'm adding 2 at a time, and once they're all displayed, if I click it again, then the link just changed to be inactive. Now, this is much more common design on mobile devices, but it actually works pretty nicely here as well, because if you've got a large set of data, users aren't going to want to just page through a bunch of it. In my opinion, I think this add more rows would work nicely with some filtering capabilities to, limit the data, give the users a subset of it, and let them scroll through and add more if they'd like to. This way your load times are decreased and, the user's in control, so we can load a page faster, but give them the control to add more. So let's take a look at how we put this in. Fortunately, this is extremely simple. In the extension library here, we've got this control called pager add rows. And all I did here was take this and drag it into one of these pager facet areas. So I like to put it in the center, so I drug it into the pager bottom. So we've got this pager add rows tag, and all we need to do is set the for property. This just connects it to the data view. If that's all you do, it'll work with the data view, and when you click add more, it'll add the same number of rows that were displayed by default for the data view. But if you'd like, you can set a custom row count. So as I had mentioned, my data view was showing 3, but every time they click the button, I wanted to add 2 more. So it's nice and easy to customize. Now, it's also important to know that for this to work properly, you have to set this refresh page to true, and then you can set partial refresh to true. Refresh page will, by default, refresh the entire page, but if you set partial refresh to true, it will just partially refresh the data view itself. So, again, very simple to add, just a couple properties to set, and now we've got this extra functionality that lets the user just add more data to it. Next thing is the pager save state control. Now this is interesting. If I expand a few columns here, say I've expanded companies 2 and 5, and then I click on company 3, and by default go back to it, the data view returns to its original state. But say this time I want to expand numbers 1 and 3, and then click on any company. Now when I return to it, 1 and 3 are still expanded. And that's because of this pager save state control. So let's take a look at this. Again in our view, also in the extension library section, there's this pager save state control. So all you need to do is drag it onto the page, and it just shows us this little save disk icon here. And there's 2 steps to this really. So we've included it to the page, and we have to set the for property to bind it to the data view. But then the other key is on the form. We just need one line of code to trigger this. So if you look at the back button that didn't work, here I basically just simply have an open page statement here. Just simple action, just returns to the previous view. But as we saw, that did not save the state of the pager. The only difference here with the save state one is I have a single line of script that gets run. And this is a specific line. This is not specific to any naming scheme that you add. But for you to return back to a view that has pager save state, you just need to execute this line of server-side JavaScript that says viewStateBean.restoreState equals true. And it activates the bean that recalled the state of that pager and returns you back to the data view with the same, expanded and collapsed rows. So that's also a very nice feature that's quite simple to add, but that can really, make users using your data view feel like they're more in the Notes client, where they're used to expanding things and then opening a document. It opens a separate tab, so when they close it, the view is sitting there, just as they had left it. So this makes it nice and easy to help recreate some of that functionality that users might be used to. Next thing I want to take a quick look at is searching a data view. And I really just wanted to mention that this is very similar to the way it is in a Notes view panel. So if I were to come in here and just do a full text search on United, I should get the companies that are here in the United States and the United Kingdom. Okay, very simple functionality, but we can see that it works. Again, this is exactly like a view panel. All I have here is an edit box, and it is bound to a scope variable, called dvSearch. My data view itself, when I go into the properties under data, the search parameter is bound to that same scope variable. And then my search button here, it does nothing other than a partial refresh on the view. So this is exactly the same way you do it in a view panel. And that's one of the neat things about this data view control. We've got all this flexibility like a repeat control. Like a repeat control, it can be linked to a view, or we can pass it a collection of documents, which is actually what I did with a nested data view. But at the same time, it has all these data source options, just like the view panel. So if we come back here and take a look at this again, just like the view panel, we have category filtering, we have keys, all these things. So I think this data view really has kind of the best of both worlds. Next, let's take a look at the multi-column layout. It's another neat thing the data view just gives you. It's a simple property to set. So right now, this is a standard data view, single column layout. But we can just as easily set it to multiple columns. So as we can see, it fills an entire row first. So it did 1, 2, and then it moves to the next row to fill. And that pattern holds as we continue to expand this. So now we've got a 3-column layout, and it works just fine, expanding and collapsing our detail sections. Now this just happens to be the number of options I programmed into it. I don't know how many it'll hold, but as we can see, it works pretty nicely and gives you this multi-column layout. I think that would work nicely with something like, a business card kind of a view. And we've all, seen these in some prototypes, but, you can actually do that kind of a thing easily now that you've got this data view control. So let's take a quick look at where that's set. And that really is just as I click on this data view, under the, let's see, down here under this format section, we have this property called multi-column count. Now I could just type a number in here, just for the purposes of this demo. I have it returning a scope variable, but basically it's just a property that that you can just easily fill in to specify the count. So that was another nice feature that the data view control makes very easy to display. Now, if you really want your users to hate you, we can take all these concepts that we've been talking about and stick them together in the same view. So we've got a multi-column layout here with icons and collapsing and categorization and all this stuff. So, there's a lot of power here. This is really more just to show, just because you can do all this stuff doesn't mean you necessarily should. But the neat thing is that this does still work. We can throw all this stuff together. This is really just still the multi-line summary column. I've got, hovering and expanding the links here. I expanded, I've got a nested data view. And if we see one that's got less data, we've got our nested data view, we've got our iframe in there, and we can have it jump all over the screen just by hovering here. So again, you wouldn't do something like this, but just to show you, there's a lot that you can do to customize this data view. There's a lot of features that you can put in here. So I think this is a very flexible tool, and hopefully you find a lot of good uses for it. So that's the end of the show. Thank you again for watching, and we'll talk to you next time.
And that's the demo. I thank Brad for the time. I thank him for his patience, because I've actually been sitting on this video for quite a while, as I've had a backlog of shows and stuff to try and get out. So I do really appreciate that. If you have any questions for me, here's my contact information, and I thank you for your time.